Fine particulate matter has long been a concern for many. It is small enough to penetrate the lung alveoli and blood vessels, causing a host of serious diseases. According to research, there are many different causes for this phenomenon, including industrial emissions, vehicle exhaust, and unregulated real estate construction activities. Under the Dome, an investigative documentary by journalist Sai Jing became the first work to address this issue. In less than 48 hours after its online release, the film reached an astonishing 100 million views. A week later, viewership had doubled, surpassing 200 million, a rare feat in the realm of documentaries. Despite its viral spread, the film was abruptly banned by Chinese authorities across all media platforms just 2 weeks after its premiere. It is noteworthy that, at first glance, the film contains no sensitive content as it focuses solely on air pollution in China, a pressing issue even President Xi Jinping has publicly expressed concern about. Viewers therefore expected government support rather than strict censorship. Yet perhaps it was the film's unflinchingly blunt exposure of the energy industry's dark corners, particularly the sources of fine particulate pollution, that made it a thorn in the side of powerful interests. The number 25 refers to the total days in January 2013 when PM 2.5, the index for fine particulate matter with a diameter of 2.5 micrometers or less, peaked, creating heavy smog over Beijing. This statistic opens Sai Jing's documentary. Initially, few believed the haze was caused by pollution, since dense fog on cold early year days is not uncommon. At that time, however, Sai Jing had carried out 4 field trips to Shaanxi, Hunan, Jiangxi, and Zhejiang. Coincidentally, all 25 provinces in China were enveloped in smog that month, affecting some 600 million people. In major cities that same year, pneumonia cases spiked sharply, with medical records uniformly citing unknown cause. As a field reporter, Sai Jing resolved to conduct a personal investigation to survey environmental conditions nationwide. The deeper she dug, the more horrified she became by the reality. The surge in cancer cases near industrial zones, rivers in Shaanxi province dying off at a rate of 62% due to pollution and benzopyrene levels, a potent carcinogen in soil and water, measuring 290 times above the regulatory limit. The blue sky, white clouds, and nighttime stars are things children have never seen, because the sky is always covered by a hazy veil and thick black smoke pillars. Sai Jing's family in Beijing faces the same air quality problem. Records show that for 175 days the air was very unhealthy or hazardous, and the other 190 days ranged from unhealthy to unhealthy for sensitive groups. That means Beijing, China's capital, never has a single day of good air quality, and more than half the year is unhealthy. Parents must keep their children indoors like prisoners if they want to protect them from fine particulate matter. A chart of statistics from 2005 to the present shows respiratory mortality rising steadily, and before long an additional 500,000 people each year will die prematurely from air pollution-related causes. This raises many questions. Why does air pollution, the hot topic of recent years, cause cancer so rapidly, and which human activities in daily life and industry generate fine particulates? It's not only Beijing. In 2014, Tianjin recorded 197 polluted days, Shenyang 152 days, and at its worst Shijiazhuang, 26 kilometers southwest of Beijing, saw 264 days of pollution. These numbers troubled Sai Jing as she wondered where pollution comes from and when it began. Are we like caged birds struggling to survive and doing everything we can to stay safe? Yet, unless we lock ourselves inside, we cannot escape inhaling fine particulates and countless suspended impurities in the air. At 2.5 micrometers in diameter, they're nearly invisible to the naked eye, but invisibility doesn't mean absence. Using a PM 2.5 sampler, Sai Jing carried it around Beijing for a day. The air quality was poor, and the once white filter turned black. Tests found 15 different carcinogens plus numerous heavy metal particles. Nasal hairs and mucus, the respiratory system's first defense, stop particles larger than 10 micrometers, but filter out only about 90% of what we inhale. Throat cilia then trigger coughing to expel dust. Yet fine particulates still penetrate the bronchi, kill white blood cells and lymphocytes because inflammation block alveoli and airways, finally overwhelming the last line of defense, the macrophages. Alongside heavy metals, a host of other diseases emerge, such as heart attacks and hypertension. With help from doctors at Beijing Cancer Hospital, Sai Jing filmed a surgery on a patient from a city with extremely polluted air. Although she was a non-smoker, her pulmonary lymph nodes were blackened from inhaling so much dust. Since 2010, PM 2.5 levels have only begun to be scientifically measured and monitored. Before that, pollution was tracked by PM 10 figures. Yet radar images of northern China's skies dating back to 2005 revealed numerous unusual fog banks, showing that fine particulates have long existed, not just in recent years. What we call winter fog actually reflects extremely poor air quality. The question arises, why are fine particulate levels typically higher in winter, especially in December and January? It's because calm winds, fewer monsoon bursts, low temperatures, and rare rainfall during this period cannot wash away or disperse the dust from urban areas, allowing long-accumulated particulates to spread more widely. Throughout history, images of industrial zones and smokestacks billowing thick black smoke have symbolized pollution. But around major cities where no industries operate, why are PM 2.5 levels still so high? Beginning its post-war recovery and economic development in 1960, China aimed to transform from an agricultural country into the world's largest industrial power. Smokestacks became symbols of progress, and coal turned into a national resource trusted by everyone, for power plants, cooking, and heating. Alongside economic growth, lung cancer rates in the world's most populous nation soared by 465% over 30 years. Data analysis shows that 60% of China's PM 2.5 pollution comes from fossil fuels, specifically coal and oil. Looking at neighboring countries, oil use raised pollution levels in Japan and the United States, and the United Kingdom once suffered severe consequences from excessive coal use. In the early 1930s, when Battersea Power Station was completed, its four 103-meter chimneys became London's pride, supplying 1/5 of the city's electricity. At its peak, the plant burned about 10,000 tons of coal per week. London literally ran on coal, powering trains, ships, machinery, metallurgy, and daily life. High demand led to the emergence of lower-quality brown coal, less fossilized and producing more ash and soot. Massive coal consumption caused severe air pollution. People wore masks to work and school. The true disaster struck on December 5, 1952, when a cold front blew over the English Channel, trapping air and preventing ventilation. Toxic smog enveloped the city, killing at least 12,000 people from poisoning. Police had to direct traffic by torchlight, and cars drove with headlights on in daylight. Surgeries also revealed victims dying from prolonged exposure to black carbon, a byproduct of long-term coal burning. Sulfur dioxide levels at the time were 190 times the WHO standard. That tragedy changed Britain's view of the environment, and it took nearly 5 decades to fully address the aftermath and develop clean energy solutions. The lesson from more than 70 years ago taught humanity the high cost of pollution and reconsideration of coal use in economic development. Yet today, China remains faithful to coal. In 2013 alone, it consumed 3.6 billion tons, more than the rest of the world combined. India is now on a similar path, ranking second in national coal consumption. Why did this strange situation arise? It all began with China's economic reforms. To keep pace with scientific and technological development and to drive energy-intensive sectors like metallurgy, machinery, and heavy industry, which require enormous energy, one of the industries consuming the most coal is iron and steel production. To build a national economy, infrastructure is the core investment. To this end, numerous steel plants were launched, most clustered in Hebei, which explains why 1/10 of China's total coal consumption occurs there. Dr. Hao Juming of Tsinghua University showed Sai Jing global steel production figures, and she was stunned to learn that Hebei's output ranks second only to the entire rest of China combined, even surpassing the United States, which ranks fourth. Yet many countries have heavy industries, So why is China's air pollution particularly severe? Using coal in metallurgy has led to widespread abuses in plant construction and design, along with the use of cheap, substandard materials. Normally, metallurgical engineers must submit detailed dust filter designs to reduce emissions into the atmosphere. On-site investigations revealed that almost no facility Sai Jing visited complied with these requirements. When questioned, workers offered evasive answers. Some even reacted with anger and threats. According to China's Ministry of Ecology and Environment, MEP, over 60% of metallurgical plants have not completed the environmental approval process. In other words, they lack the qualifications to operate. However, one cannot rely solely on law and reason, because even inspectors avoid this industry. The simple reason is that shutting down numerous violators would disrupt social welfare. Producing 10 million tons of steel provides jobs for 100,000 workers on average. As a key industry, social pressure and livelihood concerns prevent authorities from taking strict action. In other words, China is trading the environment for economic gain. For Hebei, the boom in metallurgy may be a point of pride, yet it has become a nightmare for Beijing residents. Every year when the south wind rises, dust and smoke from Hebei surge toward the Chinese capital, cloaking the city in a thick, terrifying smog. A friend from Jiangsu province asked Sai Jing, why is air quality so poor in eastern China, where metallurgical activity isn't widespread? In fact, the eastern provinces aren't particularly strong in metallurgy, but they are the heartland of cement production and power generation. According to maps, there's a power plant every 30 square kilometers, and most are traditional thermal plants. Worse still, their real-time emissions consistently exceed legal limits. Sai Jing did a quick calculation and told her friend that in Jiangsu, an average of 10 kilograms of coal is burned per square meter, so it's no surprise the province is so polluted. Another issue is coal quality. As noted during Britain's peak coal era, brown coal, a cheaper variety, was heavily favored. Not only China but countries like Germany and the UK relied on it. The key difference is that the Germans wash their brown coal before use to remove dust and control emissions. The British wash up to 95% of theirs. Pre-use washing, however, would dramatically raise initial costs. Sai Jing found that producing 1 ton of steel requires 600 kilograms of coal and 3 to 6 tons of water. Washing that coal would add $16 per ton of steel, yet market profit on a ton is only about 30 cents. That means steelmakers would incur huge losses if they adopted coal washing technology. To cut input costs, they limit high-quality coal and switch to cheaper varieties to maximize profit. Rural residents follow suit, choosing low-cost coal, but the toxins and soot take a severe toll. Lung cancer rates climb, and Yunnan province exemplifies this. One village is even dubbed the Cancer Village for using brown coal in cooking and heating. Entire families have died from the disease. Has this sounded the alarm for authorities? Clearly yes, but have they taken any measures to change it? According to experts, the easiest way to clean the environment is to reduce the country's coal consumption from 3.6 to 2 billion tons per year and to wash coal before use. By doing so, annual emissions of harmful gases could be cut by at least 50%. However, such costly technology cannot be applied in industry if policymakers want to retain producers and keep coal affordable for poorer consumers. From 2002 to 2012, the number of automobiles in China rose by about 100 million. In Beijing in 2010, 800,000 cars were newly registered, a figure dwarfed by Hangzhou, a city of 6.5 million where there is on average 1 car for every 2 people. In other words, over 3 million vehicles are licensed there. As a result, although Hangzhou is not the country's most populous city, it contributes 40% of air pollution from vehicle exhaust. A 2013 study by Canada's health authorities found that cars emit the most toxic gases primarily in 2 states: startup and low-speed driving. During startup, fuel combustion is incomplete, releasing large amounts of carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, and hydrocarbons. Likewise, in stop-and-go traffic, engines have not yet reached optimal operating temperature, causing peak emissions. To limit emissions, Sai Jing and her family chose to travel by bicycle, using a car only for emergencies or long trips. Yet the traffic situation does not support this. Every lane, including those for bicycles, is jammed with four-wheelers, meaning cyclists must risk their lives to travel. Sidewalks, too, have vanished under illegal car parking. This shows that, despite prioritizing urban infrastructure, authorities still neglect citizens' welfare. And this lack of coordination breeds illegal practices that harm both the city's aesthetics and its environment. Another question that drew much attention was, why, when nighttime traffic drops significantly, do pollution levels remain so high, almost matching peak hour readings, and create a ghostly haze? Sai Jing pondered this for a long time until the Chinese Academy of Sciences showed her a chart of daily pollution patterns. It revealed that before dawn air quality always falls into the very unhealthy or hazardous range, with carbon emissions peaking at twice the daytime levels. Sai Jing and her team undertook a night field investigation in Beijing's Yanqing district. With its extensive road and highway network, Yanqing sees a constant flow of trucks, containers, and heavy machinery throughout the night. There she encountered two bigger issues implicating the Ministry of Transport and the Ministry of Ecology and Environment. Any vehicle stopped by traffic inspectors lacks emission control or dust filter devices, despite drivers presenting official National 4 pollution standard certificates. Legally, inspectors could fine them on the spot, but they hesitate for one simple reason. Most nighttime trucks bring daily essentials like eggs and milk and are thus designated as mandatory priority vehicles. In other words, authorities won't sacrifice citizens' access to necessities for environmental regulations. Moreover, fining these vehicles would expose a web of approvals and abuses by various government departments that greenlit unqualified trucks for operation. Sai Jing officially stepped into the darkest corner of China's auto manufacturing industry. Up to 90% of so-called fake vehicles are licensed to operate without any environmental protection devices. A figure disclosed to her by Li Kansing, director of Beijing's Environmental Protection Bureau. Although diesel-powered vehicles make up only 17% of the fleet, they produce 70% of all vehicular nitrogen oxide emissions. Simple math shows that if 30,000 non-compliant trucks enter the city each night, it's equivalent to millions of cars running on the roads at night. Studies reveal diesel exhaust contains highly toxic compounds, nitro-PHS, for example, that cause cancer, trigger genetic mutations, and accelerate aging. When she paused to reflect, Sai Jing realized she couldn't bring herself to punish the drivers. They had spent money on vehicles and trusted the authorities to grant them legal permits. They too are victims of toxic emissions, inhaling them day and night. If blame is to be laid, it belongs to the manufacturers. Yet when contacted, most brand representatives mumbled that these non-standard vehicles were bound for export to third countries, such as those in Africa, or that labels had simply been mixed up. Pollution concerns are downplayed to the point that responsibility is shifted onto such elementary errors. This tragic situation exposes the failure of China's regulatory system. Not only the Ministry of Ecology and Environment, but also the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology share responsibility for allowing substandard vehicles to operate domestically and be exported. It's not that the law has no provisions for recalling substandard vehicles. Until 2014, it had never been applied. Under current regulations, a vehicle recall can occur only if a defect endangers human safety or property. In other words, omitting environmental protection devices isn't classified as a safety hazard. What about the atmospheric pollution prevention law? One might ask. Tragically, that law has never been used to penalize any company. When pressed, officials responded that only agencies with legally defined oversight authority can enforce it, but no one can specify which department holds that authority. The Ministry of Ecology and Environment disclaims responsibility. The Ministry of Industry and Information Technology gives the same answer. And the General Administration of Quality Supervision, Inspection, and Quarantine insists that any enforcement must coordinate with both the Environment Ministry and the Industry Ministry. China's Ministry of Ecology and Environment, MEP, once asked, When drafting this law, why wasn't our agency given responsibility for penalizing manufacturers, but instead duties were overlapped among multiple departments? The answer they received was, during the drafting process, many agencies opposed the law, and MEP's only role became issuing national 4 standard certificates for vehicles, without any actual inspections by any department. Simply put, MEP can only pass the law on its own, based on a very vague concept even they don't understand. Moreover, fierce market competition in the auto industry means that even brands strictly complying with environmental laws would see their market share overtaken by non-compliant vehicles the next day, leading to bankruptcy. Consumers never consider whether their cars protect the environment or reduce emissions. They only focus on price. This dilemma blocks all efforts at improvement. One might ask, other countries also have heavy peak-hour traffic in supercities. So why does only China suffer such severe air pollution? It's not just Hangzhou or China that face peak-hour congestion. Other nations also battle long traffic jams. Hangzhou's population in 2010 was only half that of Tokyo, yet Tokyo does not endure similar pollution thanks to its superior public transit system. Surveys show that during rush hour, 90% of Tokyo residents use subways or buses and only 6% drive. In Hangzhou and Beijing, over 30% drive. Simple math. If 30% of Hangzhou's population drives, more than 1 million vehicles hit the roads, causing severe jams and pollution. Even in the US, notably Los Angeles, often cited for poor urban planning, strict vehicle quality controls and penalties help curb air pollution. Another issue is diesel quality. Published data show that sulfur content in Chinese diesel is 25 times higher than in European, Japanese, or US diesel. Similarly, gasoline quality in China is 2 to 3 times lower than in other developed countries. It's worth noting that if China raised its national fuel quality by just 1 grade, it could cut emissions by 10%. It's not that people can't afford higher grade fuel. Hangzhou itself tried to buy better gasoline and diesel in 2013 but simply couldn't find any. To show how low-quality fuel affects the environment, Sai Jing and a team of scientists filmed at a service station with an infrared camera. They discovered that for every liter of fuel dispensed, about 1.5 grams evaporate into the atmosphere, carrying heavy metal toxins. The same evaporation occurs in the vehicle's tank as it sits in traffic. If you tally all hydrocarbons released by evaporation, they far exceed those emitted from the tailpipe. So why don't fuel producers make cleaner fuel that meets a higher standard? Do they lack the capability or resources? Or is setting a new standard too daunting amid worsening pollution? Both the Ministry of Ecology and Environment and the Environmental Assessment Research Center say they cannot raise the fuel standard because 90% of the officials who approve those standards come from the petroleum and petrochemical industries. These insiders continually obstruct and pressure the Ecology Ministry at every turn. For example, the Ecology Ministry calculated that upgrading gasoline and diesel from Standard 3 to Standard 4 would add only 7 cents per liter, about $0.25, to production costs. The petrochemical executives, however, demanded an additional 50 cents per liter. In theory, both sides could negotiate a reasonable compromise, but given the industry's monopoly, petrochemical companies threatened to cut off energy supplies if the ministry insisted. Faced with pressure from both the public, who fear fuel shortages, and senior government leaders, the Ecology Ministry dare not raise the standard. Similarly to penalizing non-compliant vehicles, the Ministry of Ecology and Environment once again found itself in a dilemma and simply gave up. To verify the ministry's claim, Sai Jing contacted Mr. Chao Xiangfeng, chairman of the National Fuel Standards Committee and former chief engineer of Sinopec, who replied, basically, they believe a committee must be formed with deep expertise in petrochemicals, and no one understands the industry better than its own leaders. In other words, they don't trust the MEP to have sufficient knowledge to join the council. When asked, so who is qualified to set the standards? Shouldn't there be an evaluation session to balance citizens' interests with those of producers? Mr. Chow insisted that Sinopec alone has the transparency and capability to assess and control the situation. Although transparent, they cannot disclose their finances. He argued that doing so would provoke public distrust and worsen the problem. He went on to say that fuel quality should not be raised to a higher standard, as this could trigger supply disruptions and escalate political instability. Nor should the market be fully open to foreign or private oil companies, since the energy sector is extremely complex and sensitive. Any lapse could have serious consequences. Finally, in a strained conclusion to the interview, Mr. Chow stated that Sinopec is not genuinely capable of fulfilling social responsibilities, because, as a large corporation, it cannot control everything, environmental pollution being beyond its scope. Through the interview, it becomes clear that a corporation's nature never changes. No matter the country, they always put their own interests first when deciding whether to serve the community. Although Sinopec's contributions during the nation's reform era are undeniable, the reality shows they're lagging far behind developed countries. A sad fact for a large state-owned conglomerate. What about the small traders who sell gasoline or blend low-quality fuels? Does the MEP or the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment have the right to inspect them? The absurd part is that when reporters asked local station owners to test diesel samples on the spot, the owners immediately resisted and reacted uncontrollably, yelling, threatening the reporters, even refusing to return their IDs. According to him, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment is obligated to test fuel quality at every station but has no authority to do so. His remark left the entire team speechless, not because it was wrong, but because the law simply fails to define each party's responsibilities, creating a completely awkward situation. It becomes even more farcical when every business owner insists they are 100% clean and do not violate environmental laws. When asked, why do the facilities always reek of chemicals that burn the nose and damage the corneas? Everyone, from the chairman of pharmaceutical, metallurgical, and chemical conglomerates to the city and provincial governors, offered awkward smiles. Some even tried to excuse themselves by claiming their sense of smell isn't as keen as Sai Jing's, so they noticed nothing. As mentioned, urban infrastructure development has always been a top priority. Of China's 684 cities, 184 aim to become international cities and megacities. This has driven construction firms to launch countless real estate projects. Step into any of those 184 cities and you'll see steel, cement, bricks, and mortar piled everywhere. On the surface, this building boom appears to transform residents' lives and create jobs. But conflict arises because, despite extensive construction, contractors only sell about 20 to 30% of the units they build. This exposes the massive waste of resources China is facing. Meanwhile, in their competition, steel producers churn out many low-quality products under the slogan of cheaper than rivals. They're locked in a never-ending race, exploiting unreliable resources. According to the Real Estate Development Research Center, at the current overheated growth rate, coal consumption in steel mills will not drop over the next 15 years. Instead, it will climb to 6 billion tons per year by 2030. Yet the benefits yielded are hardly worth it. It's not that there are no solutions. Since 2020, the Chinese government has pledged to tackle carbon emissions and environmental issues. And as early as 2015, Beijing issued its first red alert on air pollution, along with measures to combat fine particulates. Scientists and green tech companies have thrown themselves into pollution control. In 2014, at the APEC summit in Beijing, China and the United States issued a joint statement. The world's most populous country would cut carbon emissions by half by 2030, and non-fossil energy would make up 20% of its total energy mix. China also committed to reducing coal use in favor of natural gas and oil. But will these changes impact social welfare? Many ask, given the millions employed in metallurgy, chemicals, and construction. According to Mr. Gai Zhenhua, Vice Chairman of the National Development and Reform Commission, Environmental Protection and Green Tech Development already provide 3.9 million jobs, so that concern ranks lower. He added that if slowing economic growth is required for a better quality of life, it would be reasonable. Moreover, every seemingly impossible problem Sai Jing highlighted has a fix. Gas stations must install reverse vapor recovery systems to trap fumes. Construction sites should cover spare materials and soil with tarps. Restaurants need specialized exhaust hoods to prevent kitchen emissions from drifting into neighborhoods. Reform is essential, though it takes time, it's achievable. To ensure enforcement, a hotline now lets citizens report any violations by builders, eateries, or gas stations that break the law. Although Premier Li Keqiang and President Xi Jinping praised its practicality, Under the Dome by Sai Jing proved too blunt for public release. The documentary exposes deep-seated flaws and subtly accuses government officials of sacrificing the environment and human lives for 4 decades of economic growth. No department escapes its scrutiny, yet authorities only offer evasive smiles. Though reform takes time, the film's unvarnished truth struck like a slap in the face to the ruling powers. As a result, despite its hopeful vision of a more prosperous, healthier future, Under the Dome was forced offline and has since faded into obscurity. While it doesn't prescribe many concrete fixes, bureaucratic overlap creates tangled challenges. It paints a comprehensive portrait of the severe pollution crisis we confront. The film serves as a wake-up call. Economic development must go hand in hand with environmental stewardship and heightened social awareness. That concludes our video. Thank you for watching. Goodbye and see you next time.